Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's bonus episode of I Cast Fireball, which we call Meet Geek. My name's Jacob, aka Lance Thalen, who will be your host for these special episodes where we dive into the geekdom of each of our cast and how we have come to play this game that we all love. Today's cast member in the spotlight is... me? Question mark?
Yes, Jacob normally is the host for these bonus episodes, but me, Thomas, the DM, will be jumping in so that we can also give our interviewer an interview themselves and get to know him a little bit, what got him into this world of D&D, as well as just any fandom or geekdom as well. So, Jacob, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Just pleasantly here with you in your great wine red robe on the video call I want all of our listeners to know about.
Maybe we'll take a picture of it and we'll post it on our Instagram as a... maybe it'll be a DM tip or something. Always wear a wine red robe when prepping for your next session.
The blood of your former players stains this robe.
That's right. Well, Jacob, things have been going have been a little intense in the last few episodes that have been released for the story. I mean, we just dropped episode 15, and Lance Thalen just had, spoilers for episode 15 if you haven't listened to it yet, just for the next few minutes here, but Lance Thalen just navigated a very tricky conversation with the orc camp.
Yes.
Lance
Thalen
that was huge.
Yeah, he's definitely, as I stated in the episode, he's definitely way in over his head, or that's what he feels like at least, and he is like on pins and needles that this all will come crashing down at a moment's notice, because he is not used to being the front man, and he feels like that's just kind of the role he's had to take on, and he is not liking it. But right, you can't really do much or else you're gonna get killed.
I kind of wish when we were recording that episode we had been recording our faces, because seeing the journey that your face took when the orcs were responding in certain ways. Oh my gosh. And you can hear it kind of in the episode as well, like, with that information, I quickly, you like pivoted 5 times in what you were going to do in that conversation, and it was so enjoyable to re-listen to that and re-experience that face journey a second time.
100%. It was the plan that went into that orc camp was not the plan that came out of it.
Where it was like, hey, we should probably sow some dissent to, all right, so let's burn down the camp.
All right, 24 hours, bonfire, let's go.
Okay. Oh, man, what a wonderful... We'll have to see how that ends up in either this next episode or a future episode, and I'm real excited for you listeners to join us to see what happens as a result of all that.
Without giving away too much, there are plenty twists and turns to come.
That's true. Absolutely true. It'll definitely be something you don't want to miss, in my opinion.
For sure.
Well, now that we're kind of caught up, we've catched up about Lance Thalen, to the excitement of the most recent episode, let's get into a little bit about you, Jacob. Let's talk about you, got you into D&D, and, I think we're going to start with the question that everybody was asked. How did you get into D&D?
What a good question. That's a good question. Good question to start with. Yeah. Well, I think the answer I will give is actually, this is the first question that everyone's been asked, and I think everyone but you has given the same answer. You, Thomas, got me into D&D. You got me into the whole role-playing, tabletop, RPG kind of atmosphere. It was in college. I remember you coming up to me and my wife, Kelly, and saying, hey, so there's this thing called like Pathfinder. Have you ever heard of Dungeons and Dragons? It's kind of like that, and it's like a really fun game where you're just collaborating and you're working together. And let's do something on Saturday. And we were like, oh, I don't know about that. And we eventually chagriningly agreed. And we showed up on Saturday, and we had rough characters. I was a barbarian the first time around because I was like, I don't want something complicated. I just want to start hitting stuff. And it was surprisingly really amazing. And it was walking out of that first session, and it was a Pathfinder session. It wasn't full Dungeons and Dragons. It was Pathfinder, that version of it all.
Pathfinder's still an amazing tabletop system, especially the second edition that they came out with. I'd highly recommend checking it out.
It has its own crazy mechanics that are just adding to the intricacies of what you could do. And I remember walking out, and I was almost disappointed in myself for liking it that much. Because I had heard of Dungeons and Dragons growing up, like barely heard of it. The first time I ever interacted with anything related to it was the famous, I forgot the comedy troupe's name. Probably someone can automatically name it, but they released an audio comedy bit about Dungeons and Dragons being Satan's game, and like this nerdy meetup where they're like, I attack the darkness, and obviously
I know the YouTube video you're talking about.
Some people probably will catch on to that immediately and be like, oh, that's something like Dead Ale, something like that.
If you're a Wizard of Light, why did you have to attack the darkness?
And it was just this nerdy little comedy bit, and I was like, haha, that's funny. Yeah, D&D's geeky. And then fast forward, to college, and I'm walking out being like, crap, I'm one of those guys. and it just kind of picked up from there. We played a couple more sessions with y'all before Kelly and I had graduated, and then we moved on. And I was actually, though, the first to start out 5e Dungeons and Dragons, and kind of tried to rope you into it, being like, hey, it's a really cool system, simplified from Pathfinder, but yet has its own unique features, and that's kind of where we caught the train from there.
Absolutely. I remember that first game fondly because it was my first time being a dungeon master as well, actually, in that session. Like, I had played as a player, but with you, a couple friends, and my wife. We even had our other friend, John, who was there. And
shout out to John Ryman. John Ryman!
Yeah, and me and John had played before, but I remember the very first, session was so intriguing, and because what happened, and I won't go too into this, but it was just so interesting, how first players react, because I was describing you walking through a forest on a road, you all were buddies, and then you see a town ahead, and the gate was open, and there were guards in the front, and the three new people, you, your wife, and my wife, instantly were like, all right, attack mode, here we go. It's time for us to go. And so somebody stealthed into the trees, others were getting their weapons out, somebody was drawing their bow out and was aiming at the guards, and me and John were looking at each other with panic in our eyes if you want to declare war on this town, I suppose that's an option. And so, but it's just interesting because you don't know, you're like, oh, I can act like a human instead of just immediately murdering these people that I'm finding on the road. But I just remember that situation fondly, of oh wow, this could turn very quickly, very fast. Thankfully, it worked out because we're still playing years after that first game here. Yeah,
it's still carrying on, and it still brings surprises and fun, and just that's what I love about it. That's what I love about Dungeons and Dragons. It just brings something new almost every session, where you never considered this angle before, this way of doing it, this way of playing this scenario, and you can play the same. I mean, people out there who have done it, who have played the same campaign multiple times, oftentimes it doesn't go the same way. It can do a whole 180 where you had a long, intricate battle that turns into the next time you play it, it might become a best friend buddy sitcom situation. It's just crazy.
Right. My platinum dragon in me.
Yeah, my platinum dragon in me.
So let's build on that. So you've had, you played 5th edition before myself, as I was still playing Pathfinder, but you have played for years, just like me, and what's one of the moments that really stick out to you, one of your best memories. And it could be from this podcast as well, but like, what's one of your best memories of playing Dungeons and Dragons, and why was it such a good or memorable experience?
Well, there's a lot of fun memories that are attached to it. Best memory. I gotta think about that for a second. Okay. This is when I officially knew that this was a game I could play for a long time. It was the first campaign that I did with 5e, and I was a half-orc ranger, and we were just doing like the basic intro. I forget it. It's basically the starter.
Oh, the starter set.
Yeah, the starter set campaign.
Yeah.
But the person who was DMing it, who was dungeon mastering it, controlling it, had actually like expanded the story somewhat. So it was cool, adding like elements that weren't in the original kind of thing, kind of creating his little offshoot homebrew from it. And we had gotten into this kind of fortress thing that was full of this enemy, and we had found enemies before we got there, and we put on their cloaks and stuff, and so we were trying to blend in and try and not. And I remember it was because it was a bunch of orcs who were part, like, orc mercenary, half orc, and a lot of goblins as part of this little fortress, and a couple of humans. And what would happen is my character could speak orc and goblin, and what happened is we had like killed somebody in a hallway, and all of a sudden, like, turning the corner was like a patrol, and we were like basically like dragging this body along, and then they like turned the corner and see us dragging the body, and we totally were like gonna bluff it, and we just totally were like, we found this guy, there's intruders, man, we don't know what's going on. And they're like, oh my gosh, we gotta help. And we rolled really well on persuasion or deception, and so they're like, we gotta help you. And we're like, yeah, I know, and like help us with this. And I was like playing off, like, because I had a human with me who was in disguise, and I was like, this human, it's his first time on guard duty, you know, humans. And the goblins were like, haha, we know humans, stupid. And it was like this whole, all of a sudden, like, we were like buddies with this patrol, and we brought them into this area that had a trap that we saw before, and we triggered the trap, and it fell on them and killed them all. And the noise of that trap brought in more guards, and we did the same thing where we're like, oh my gosh, these idiots were chasing these intruders, and they caught the trap, and we rolled again successfully. And it was like, and we did the whole like, you know, humans, those idiots. And they're like, yeah, we know humans. And it was just so golden. It was such a comedic, funny moment of just such a out of the box way of trying to get through this situation. And I was just dying, and I was loving every moment of it. So that was a pretty good memory when I knew this is not only fun in strategy, but it's fun in just making crap up.
Yeah. Yep. And just rolling with it. Oh gosh. Oh, you know, that reminds me, and it hints at certain elements of that I've played in video games as well, to where you just do something crazy, and then in a video game, like, you've maxed out your deception or whatever. So even though, or like Skyrim's a great example, you max out your stealth, and you can walk you just have to crouch literally right in front of somebody, and then you can steal everything in sight. And that just has such high Skyrim vibes there. And you know, you said that I got you into RPGs, but that's not entirely true, because I might have gotten you into tabletop RPGs, but you had some other interests or some hobbies growing up and some experience with that, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I grew up with a couple of things that probably helped influence my love of Dungeons and Dragons and our current campaign. I would say the first time I ever got into fantasy was, I mean, it's the gold standard in my mind, Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, the movies specifically, because I had never heard of, I had heard of some, obviously there's fantasies out there and little kid books that are, you know, fantasies and stuff, but not like deep fantasy of like just the mythology almost aspect to it. And I remember I have a distinct memory of going to the movie theaters, and I wasn't even seeing Lord of the Rings that day. I can't even remember the movie I was seeing that day, but I sat down And the trailer, it was the first trailer for the first Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. And it shows them like crossing the mountains, and you get the epic music. Dun, 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 dun. And no more for copyright reasons. But, and they're crossing the mountains, and I'm seeing like these short people and this tall, lanky wizard dude and this elfin dwarf. And I thought, as soon as the trailer ended, I thought, that's going to be the stupidest movie ever. I thought that looked like the stupidest, geekiest movie. And then I went to see it because I think a year later when it came out, my brother wanted to go see it, and we went to see it. And I think it wasn't the same moment. It was a similar moment, but not exactly similar to the first time I played Pathfinder with you, where I came out of it being like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And I wasn't disappointed with myself then, but I was just I was just astounded by just how epically intricate that kind of story could be. And I just started grabbing onto anything and everything that could. Specifically with, and this leads to maybe another interest I had, was with video games. There's a lot of video games out there, and there's so many good different genres and things, but I loved the games that were kind of fantasy story based, that had, I wasn't too much into every kid played Halo and, liked to play with his friends, but I really gravitated toward the story games, and especially the story games that offered choice and offered different ways that the story could play out. The ones that I'm thinking are Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2.
Yeah. With literally D&D, in the Star Wars universe.
In the Star Wars universe, Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights. Later on, going into such things as Dragon Age, Mass Effect, obviously. I love those kind of stories. I love them so much. Well, Fable, yep, Fable's another one. I love the ability to take a story in so many different directions, to do so many different things with a character, and to almost like you create this world for yourself that can be so unique and original. And I just loved it. I loved doing that stuff. And I think that's why, and I should have realized it, because all that comes from the D&D mechanics. All that comes from the original tabletop mechanics of it all. They just put it into a computer or video game format. But yet, for some reason, the dice and paper, that's just too much for me. And then I should have wised up a little bit to that. But those I would say those two things, getting into the fantasy world with Lord of the Rings, and then also just my love of story mode in video games, and being able to, not story mode, just story-based video games that have intricate choices to them and intricate ways that you can craft your own character to be unique. I just love. And and that's what Dungeons and Dragons is. It helps you create your own story, and it's unique every time. One more thing also that adds to it, which Ned has brought up too, is improv. Because I did improv in college with you, and in our kind of comic troupe, our improv troupe, and that just lends so much to Dungeons and Dragons too, especially the way you can tell a story and making it up on the spot. And there are those out there, and it's perfectly great because Dungeons and Dragons provide you such a rich story already that you can just go with that and have fun with it, and just literally play the quests given to you and not have to do necessarily a lot of backstory or a lot of different, you can play more of the game versus more of the story. But with improv as a background, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Dungeons and Dragons, it allows a lot for people to just if you feel intimidated and to tell a story or to create a rich background, that's definitely not the only way to play. You can just be very I wouldn't call them static, but you could be characters that just are that just follow the story and still have a perfectly enjoyable time, and just react to the situation in front of you instead of feeling like you have to have all this history. And absolutely, as you pointed out, that's a definitely viable way to play a campaign as well.
Yeah. And I love that idea of it, because sometimes it's just, you want to get to the main story. There's a lot of fun side things, but you want to get to the main story. But at the same time, to with an improv background, to see where the story takes you and to go along with it and to yes and it is just such an adventure in itself. So that's another kind of bleed into how I came to like D&D, because it can be a very improv focused activity. That, I mean, I think that's kind of what I mean, this is me speaking for myself, but I bet it could apply to Ned and you as well, that this is kind of giving us our improv kicks without joining a full troupe.
Yeah, it's fair. It's almost like a fix, if you will.
Exactly.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can explore here, and the thing that I really like about because I've mentioned I also love those RPG video games, but also these tabletop games as well, is it allows you to be your own type of a hero, and ultimately when I think of the thing that draws me to fantasy so much is the hero's ability to overcome pretty much any obstacle. I mean, whether that's through magical means, through just their sheer grit, or I mean, and it's another reason why I mentioned previous in another episode, I'm such a huge fan of Brandon Sanderson as well, and he does generally fantasy, is because there's the hero's tale that is told is very inspiring and very heartwarming, and I feel like in D&D you get your chance to tell your own hero story as well. And I feel like for the majority of the population, a lot of people like to tell to listen or tell their own type of a hero story in whatever capacity that is. So,
well, and that heroes also don't have to be perfect. That is something that I've found that is so fun in D&D, because literally on your character sheet you have flaws. And I think that's so fun to play into that. Like Lance Thalen, I could totally get if audience members are frustrated sometimes being like, Lance is such a hypocrite. And you're 100% right. He is a hypocrite. He tells, in a previous episode, he tells Malamara to stop sneaking off and let the group know. And what does he do immediately? He sneaks off and tries to do something, and he lands on his face doing it, basically. And that's what's so great about this story is you can see even, and this is leaning in more of the story side of things. And again, I favor that, but I totally understand those who are like, who want to stick to the game itself. But I like to blend in some of the story you can bring to it, because you can see a character and their progression. That Lance is very selfish and he's very hypocritical, but he starts to learn and he starts to care a little bit, and he starts to realize there's things I got to change. And I think that's happening for all characters. Fleeple is kind of not questioning his faith, but questioning the application of his faith, possibly. When before it's like, oh, burn everybody to the ground who doesn't think, or who at all is involved with Tiamat, and kobolds themselves. And it's like, well, let's think about that. And then Malamara with, just being like we have to attack, we have to be, just the obvious choice is the one you always go with, when it's like, well, let's think about this, let's take a step back, which is Lance's favorite thing to do. But all of us have different character flaws that add to the story and add to how can these way different individuals get along. And it's so fun.
Right.
It's so fun.
Absolutely. And I mean, in order to have an arc of redemption or to go on this hero's quest, I feel like there has to be obstacles that are overcome. And, although they are situational obstacles, but some of the most satisfying for me in literature and in story are the obstacles that they've had to overcome within themselves, through their flaws or through their ideals and things like that. And so absolutely, it's just another layer onto that storytelling aspect. Let's go into that. If sort of our last question, the remaining time that we've got, you mentioned yourself, Jacob, Lance Thalen has a lot of flaws and is fairly hypocritical. Taking your own words there, not inserting them. So
you took those words, though, and you ran with them.
But to build on that, and that idea of why this type of a character, why create Lance Thalen to be the way that he is?
Oh, man. Lance was fun to create, and he's still being created. I mean, that's the beauty of this story. But I wanted to create, I don't want to give too much away background, because obviously that lends into possibly what's going to happen later on with our story, but I wanted to create a character that had major flaws, that wasn't the typical D&D kind of character, the one where a opportunity happens, like for instance the first battle that happens. Lance hid the whole time, and I thought that was just such an interesting choice to throw in there. And I know I didn't want to do it every time, because that obviously puts the other players, it can put the other players at a major disadvantage if it's like a crucial battle, which obviously there's a balance that needs to happen between, interesting character choice and, but support your party. And
right.
But it was just an interesting choice, I remember, and I hadn't planned on doing that until it happened, because I was thinking Lance has no investment of what's going on right now. He doesn't want to die, and so he's just going to hide. And if it got pretty serious, me as a player could step in and find a way to be like, okay, how can I motivate Lance to get involved in this? If it was like, Fleeble's about to go unconscious, it's like, I got to get involved somehow. But seeing just how, and let's be honest, everyone was surprised how crazy Ned's character went from 0 to 100 real fast in battle and wiped a lot of them out. It was just such an interesting thing to bring to this character, was to have a lot of flaws, a lot of things that make him apprehensive. Because I've played, for the most part, every time I've played D&D, I have played a character that's very, very upfront, meaning they're jumping into every conversation, they're jumping into every fight, they're always getting involved, they're always, being the typical the battle's begun, let's go, or okay, we got to fight and we got to do this. And except for that one example, which was hilarious from the first time I had a campaign in D&D, but it was just I wanted to bring a character that started off so rough as a person, and this is kind of like it's a rough stone rolling. He is crafting himself as he goes, and he definitely is going to take some hits, and he's going to realize there's a lot of flaws to this diamond that he's trying, that hopefully he can become, but it's fun to find that along the way.
Yeah, so because we're pretty much out of time here, just with your the last question here, I know that we've recorded just a few episodes past episode 15 here, so we know a little bit of what happens directly in the next few episodes, us as the players, but what do you think are the situations that would have to happen, or what do you think are going to, what is going to refine Lance Thalen, right? Because you say he's a rolling stone, he's continually being refined. What are the things that are going to refine him or cause him to evaluate? Or does that make sense? My question.
Yeah, I think that the thing that's going to polish that kind of rough edge for him is staying with the group, which obviously would be pretty lame if I was like, nope, I'm going, and then it's out of the. No, I don't want to do that at all.
Peace.
But yeah, peace. I'm out. But as probably, I'm hoping some of the audience has started to catch on, and future episodes might lead more into this later, that the longer he's staying with these people, the more he's starting to care about them, and the more he's realizing that he can't just take selfish actions all the time. I think he even says when there's that big confrontation with Fleeple, making a choice that Lance did not like. I personally loved Ned making that choice to go fight the dragon outside the keep, the dragon person outside the keep, but Lance was not okay with that choice at all. And Lance, I think, says specifically somewhere in the next episode that he's starting to care about them and he can't do that again. And that kind of leads to a little bit of his backstory and how we're going to learn more of that. But the longer he stays with this group, the more I think we'll see him those rough edges start to be hacked away little by little, because he is starting to care about these people. He's starting to care about Fleeple. He wouldn't be talking to Fleeple about his faith if he didn't care about him. He wants to help this guy who seems to be on a path and Malamara seems to have a lot going on with her, and yeah, she's got a lot of issues. But she has always been there to defend them, even insulting Lance every step along the way. She's always stepping up and defending them, and it seems like he's seeing that more and more and realizing that it's not just her aggression, it's her caring, and he's starting to give that care back to them. And I think that's what's going to happen. It's not where we end up, it's the relationships we make along the way. And I think that's for Lance.
Perhaps the polishing were the friends we made along the way. And with that terrible segue and joke, I think we're going to wrap up this Meet and Geek with Jacob.
Oh, man.
Because I don't think we could end on a higher note than that.
We're all the way up. We're good.
Well, Jacob, thanks for letting me turn the table, so to speak, and interview you. And maybe on a future episode, whether it be Meet or Geek or some new segments we might have coming out in October, we'll find out a little bit more about that scarf that Lance Thalen's wearing.
You know, it's just I'll give it away right now. He found a really good deal at Kohl's, and he just can't forgive himself for spending that much money, even though he thought it was a good deal.
I thought you were gonna say Forever 21, which would make more sense.
You know, he went out on a limb, and it didn't work out, but he's too stubborn to let it go.
He's like, I didn't keep the receipt.
Dang it, I gotta use this till it disintegrates off my body.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And everybody, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of iCast Fireball, our special bonus episode, Meet and Geek. We hope you've enjoyed listening as much as we've enjoyed talking about characters and Dungeons and Dragons and why we are playing this game and how much we love it. Wherever you get your podcast from, please leave us a review. It really helps boost our ratings on the podcast service. We want to get the word out there to show in other people's recommended feeds, and it lets us know that you like what we're doing. So if you want to write something a little longer than just a review, please write the review, but then you could also email us at icastfireball2020@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and we're really hoping to get the word out there and set this podcast on fire.
Well, not to mention email. We've had a couple people reach out to us through Instagram as well.
And, yes. So if you want to reach out on social media.
Yeah, it's been so satisfying to hear just people's responses, to get that encouragement, because as a creator, it's just nice to get encouragement from time to time, to know that people are liking what you're doing. So, yeah, it's just super nice to be able to hear that people are enjoying the story.
Now, if you want to get the most recent update on content and obviously comment to us and we can maybe give you a shout out, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter with the handle iCastFireball20. There you can get possible sneak peeks of upcoming episodes, interesting insight from the players and DM, funny memes that relate to our content, and some behind the scenes shots like Thomas's red wine robe of our interesting fun world that we bring here. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sister podcast, Improv Tabletop, where our resident kobold, Ned, takes a turn as the game master and runs a mini 1-month adventure using the Fate Accelerated Tabletop system. This month especially, you want to check that out because we have another iCast Fireball cast member hopping over there, giving a good voice to a character. I'm not going to spoil it, but go check it out. Go check it out, and you'll hear a couple of familiar voices over there. Whether you like tabletop games, improvisation, or hearing more from Ned, again, go take a listen to Improv Tabletop. Lastly, please like and subscribe and share with your friends and fellow wacky adventurers this podcast. Until next time, I'm Jacob, the host of our Meet and Geek, and we've got
Thomas, the DM.
Thank you, Thomas, so much. Let's keep the fire going, everyone, and we'll see you next time.